Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. Last week we talked about a petition campaign to pressure the Israeli government to hand back the body of Shadi Shurafi to his family. I'm happy to announce that his body has been returned. Most credit goes to journalist Gideon Levy for his Haaretz article about the wanton killing of the Palestinian plumber and the confiscation of his body. But we believe the petition helped too. Thousands saw it, including, no doubt, ever-watching Israeli government friends. Unfortunately, Israel is not giving up necro-kidnapping. A year ago, Ahmad Erekat was killed on the day of his sister's wedding. Apparently, he lost control of his car at a checkpoint and it rolled into an Israeli soldier, wounding her slightly. Erekat got out of his car, raised up his hands, and then was shot to death. His body was taken by Israel. It's been kept for a year. The Israeli High Court said it was legal for the Israeli government to keep his body. Shurafi has no doubt been buried, but efforts to help his family should not end. We need to work to get the Israeli government or the international community at a war crimes trial to have the soldiers who shot Shurafi arrested and punished. Shurafi, as you recall, was a plumber going to work on the town water pipes in Beta. Keep looking at thestruggle.org for news about the campaign. And of course, send your ideas to mail@thestruggle.org. From the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem, more destruction. Israelis tearing down a cistern used by Palestinian farmers, a farm building, and lastly, a Palestinian farmer's house. 11 people lived in that home.
انت كمان الو دبر لك
يا حسبي يلا يلا تدور فيها يلا هذا مكانهم هذا مكانهم اليهود يا ربي وجاء شرب يا ربي خلي الدنيا تلومك يا ابن الاسلام يا رب يا رب جبنا المسلمين يا رب جبنا المسلمين يا عربي هذا يا رب ولا نومك خلي الدنيا تلومك يا ابن الاسلام
And the Israeli government screams and yells because its settlers can't get to eat Ben and Jerry's ice cream. Now from August 20th, a bit of history that the establishment doesn't want you to remember. The time in 2001 that the Taliban offered to surrender to the U.S. Video from Democracy Now!
The U.S. invaded Afghanistan October 7, 2001, less than a month after the al-Qaeda attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Within days of the U.S. bombing of Afghanistan, the Taliban offered to hand over Osama bin Laden, the al-Qaeda leader. But the Bush administration rejected any negotiations with the Taliban. This is Bush's press secretary, Ari Fleischer, responding to a question in October 2001.
Would you go so far as to say that no matter what the Taliban might say at this point, it may not make any difference? Are you ignoring whatever they may say?
The president could not have made it any clearer 2 weeks ago when he said that there will be no discussions and no negotiations. So what they say is not as important as what they do, and it's time for them to act. It's been time for them to act.
In December of 2001, just a month or two later, the Taliban offered to surrender control of Kandahar if its leader, Mullah Muhammad Omar, would be allowed to, quote, live in dignity in opposition custody. U.S. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld rejected the offer.
If you're asking, would an arrangement with Omar where he could, quote, live in dignity in the Kandahar area or some place in Afghanistan be consistent with what I have said? The answer is no, it would not be consistent with what I have said.
That's Donald Rumsfeld speaking December 6, 2001. The U.S. war in Afghanistan would continue for almost 20 more years through to now. According to the Cost of War Project, the U.S. has spent over $2.2 trillion in Afghanistan and Pakistan. By one count, at least 71,000 Afghan and Pakistani civilians have died in the fighting. Afghanistan is now facing a massive humanitarian crisis, and the Taliban is back in power. While Mullah Muhammad Omar died in 2013, his brother-in-law, Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, now appears set to become Afghanistan's next president. Well, today we're spending the hour with the Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Spencer Ackerman, author of the new book, Reign of Terror: How the 9/11 Era Destabilized America and Produced Trump. The book is based in part on his reporting from Afghanistan, Iraq, and Guantanamo. Spencer, it's great to have you back. Congratulations on your book. So we're talking to you in the midst of this chaos in Kabul right now as thousands of Afghans, Americans, and other nationals are attempting to flee Afghanistan. The Taliban have taken over. But we chose to begin back 20 years ago. I'm not going to say at the beginning because it goes far back from there. But talk about this moment as the U.S. began bombing and occupying Afghanistan, when the Taliban basically said they would surrender and also give Osama bin Laden over. The U.S. rejected. President Bush rejected both.
This was a central aspect of the war on terror at its inception and a foreshadowing of what its implications would be. Once we accept the frame that Bush offered, war on terror, we were then locked into a struggle not just against al-Qaeda, the entity culpable for the 9/11 attacks, but a much broader struggle against an enemy that a president could redefine at will and leave in the popular imagination was something along the lines of a civilizational challenge to America for the future, one in which America itself was in the balance. Now, let's look in particular at that moment in Kandahar. The United States' Northern Alliance allies had routed the Taliban from Kabul. The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan had fallen after about 5-6 years in power. And they recognized after a last stand they tried to put on in Kandahar didn't go the way they expected, that the end was near for them. And then they offered to Hamid Karzai, the U.S.'s appointed leader for a post-Taliban Afghanistan, that as long as Mullah Omar could live in some kind of house arrest, basically, not be killed, not be, put up on trial, they were prepared to entertain negotiations for what their role might be in a post-Taliban Afghanistan, basically a political settlement at that point. Karzai, for all his flaws that the United States would both contribute to and then criticize him for over the coming years, nevertheless knew Afghan history and recognized that unless there was some kind of political future for the Taliban would opt for a violent future. And they had a proven capacity not just to wage an insurgency, but to triumph in one. And Karzai took the deal. It was the Bush administration, the United States, that said such a deal was unacceptable, not to the Afghans, but unacceptable to the United States, that now took it on itself, as it has so often throughout its history in so many parts of the world, to tell Afghans the way their country was about to be.
Look back at history. Conditional surrenders take place all the time. In fact, our most cataclysmic war, World War II, ended with an agreement with Imperial Japan to allow Emperor Hirohito to remain as emperor. The U.S. knew he had actively taken part in war plans and was as responsible as other war criminals. But they made the deal. Bush and Rumsfeld and Cheney would not make a deal. They wanted decades of the so-called war on terror to take place. And they knew they had almost all the Democrats and Republicans on board. Let's say you're an average person and want to invest $10,000. Now, I know the average person doesn't have $10,000, but let's pretend. You go to the bank with that 10 grand and ask for the highest interest rate on a CD that the bank can offer. You put that money in and you save it for 20 years at that high rate of 0.5% a year. After 20 years, your CD will be worth $11,048. Now let's say a corporate guy took $10,000 20 years ago and bought stock in the 5 biggest war-making companies like Raytheon and General Dynamics. That money, after the same time period, goes up 873%. And corporate guy now has over $97,000. To quote the article by John Schwartz, these numbers suggest that it is incorrect to conclude that the Taliban's immediate takeover of Afghanistan upon the U.S.'s departure means that the Afghan war was a failure. On the contrary, from the perspective of some of the most powerful people in the U.S., it may have been an extraordinary success. The piece also notes that on the board of directors of these defense companies, one often finds some of the highest-ranking retired military officers of the U.S. In 1933, Congress created a commission to study how much the munition makers and high finance people like J.P. Morgan, how much their influence caused the U.S. to get into World War I. We need something like that commission today. You know, we're getting ever grimmer warnings from scientists and the United Nations about climate collapse. However, Biden is not making an all-out fight against fossil fuel pipelines. That means it's up to the people. On August 16th, people in Minnesota held protests against the Line 3 pipeline. Video from Unicorn Riot.
Hello everybody, welcome. This is Nico from Unicorn Riot. We are live in St. Paul in front of the governor's mansion, governor's residence. Stop line 3 action right now. Projects and also line 3. And so again, you hear the chant now, stop line 3. Line 3 is getting close to construction being finished in Minnesota. It's one of the biggest fossil fuel infrastructure projects in the North American history. A lot of people are saying that it's going right through treaty land. It's going to disrupt the flow of wild rice. It's going to hurt water and the grounds around it if the pipeline stays, and if not only if, but when the pipeline cracks and starts to break at certain spots. There's also been some pipeline breakage already. They've also broke into the aquifer down underneath while they were doing fracking. It's been a lot of bad things that Enbridge has already done, and Enbridge is also the purveyors of the worst inland oil spill in American history, and that was in 1991 in Minnesota as well. And so Enbridge is a Canadian corporation with ties to a lot of these pipelines that we see around the Midwest and a lot of different lines that we see around the Midwest. And they've created those for maybe 40, 50 years. Line 3 is a newly constructed replacement pipeline that'll be going through Canada, from Alberta, Canada, through North Dakota, Minnesota, and into Superior, Wisconsin, where Enbridge has their station, and therefore then from Enbridge it gets shipped down to the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of the oil flows out of America and into overseas countries, oil stashes for other countries to use. So a lot of people are also questioning that, like why would people want to continue to support a pipeline that wouldn't even have the oil go to the specific people that are actually impacted and affected by the construction of that pipeline? So we're going to talk to some folks here today about what they think about the Line 3 project and the resistance to it. We've seen hundreds and hundreds of arrests up north Minnesota, where water protectors are continuing their resistance against the construction and continuing to put themselves in front of construction, lock themselves down to construction, as well as face serious charges and now face jail time and felony charges, as I was saying. So we're gonna allow this march to continue. We're gonna talk to some folks in a little bit. This march is gonna go down into parts of St. Paul that'll lead to the U.S. Bank. So as we were talking about some of the destruction that Enbridge has already caused in their construction of the Line 3 pipeline, there's already been 9, I repeat, there's been 9 accidental releases of drilling mud from Enbridge's horizontal directional drilling. Several of the incidents happened at the headwaters of the Mississippi, which is one of the largest rivers in the world and goes to the drinking water of many millions of people. within that, the State House of Representatives and Senators, they authored a letter to the Pollution Control Agency of Minnesota, and they call for transparency around the spills. Enbridge is being pretty mum's the word on their spills. Again, we're here live in St. Paul, Grand Avenue. Just heard a opening of a ceremony right now. We're in front of a Chase Bank. This is a Stop Line 3 rally. You see about 150, 200 people have gathered out here. Very hot day here in St. Paul, Minnesota. We're a block away from the governor's residence. People have gathered to say no to Line 3 and stop the Line 3 construction that's going on in northern Minnesota.
And some August joy from the New York Botanical Garden. That's our program for today. Pandemic is setting in again. Stay safe, but stay active. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.